Hi there, my name is Denise Eckert, and I'm from the Relaxation Lounge. And I love coming on here to help you lower the stress in your life. And today I have Fred Brown, and he's an advanced Buteyko breathing specialist. He's also a respiratory therapist of 28 years, working at a New York hospital. He's passionate about educating his clients on how to improve their health through the correct breathing. Now, Fred, welcome, welcome, welcome. One of the reasons why I really wanted to
Hey.
come on here is because you help people also with their sleep habits and their sleeping.
Mhm.
Now, what inspired
Absolutely.
you to work with people with respiratory and helping them sleep?
So that's a great question. Um, well, it started with wanting to. I always knew that I wanted to work in the health field, but I really was not passionate about giving folks toxic drugs, and and so that was always a barrier. But I found a way to exercise my passion without being so inundated with treating people with toxic drugs and medication. So as a respiratory therapist, because we're working mainly on the respiratory system and mainly part of the code team, I felt a great sense of value being able to service the community in that fashion without having to compromise and pawn off toxic drugs and medication to try to just deal with symptom care opposed to true health care.
And that's the problem too, when you do take the drugs and there's the side effects and eventually they stop working and there's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with things like that. So can you explain a little bit what the Buteyko method is?
Sure, and I'll attach it to how I even transitioned. So as a medical professional, I found that even though I was serving my clients, I felt there was a missing link, right? I was tired of just seeing my clients, the revolving door, even though I wasn't, doing all the toxic drugs, but they would, leave the ER and then, before you know it, they're back again. And so I felt that I could do a much better service by further looking into, because I knew always it was holistic care that's the true source of improving the quality of life opposed to just addressing symptoms. And so that's when I started going online as a, more for my asthmatic patients, seeing what can I do for them. And that's when I came across this Buteyko breathing method that was not only, it was very much aligned with my governing values because it wasn't dealing with toxic drugs and medication, but it was getting to the core root issue, and that's at the cellular level. And so that attracted me, and a combination of already my background in as a respiratory therapist, I was able to really understand the concepts very quickly and accelerated in that program. Because much of the tech theory I already had knowledge about. But it was great to align myself with a doctor who taught these principles, but was really having an impact on the community in during his tenure, and now passing it down to other individuals. I was just super excited. Now, what really got me going was I was able to apply this directly to my asthmatic patients in the hospital, right? Because it was still within the scope of my profession. I was able just to give them some basics and really test to see if this really worked. And to my surprise, I'll give you a little example. There was an asthmatic woman. She was like in her 30s, fairly young, and she was in ICU one day. And I said, this would be a great time to test some of these principles. And normally, when you're in the ICU in what's called status asthmaticus, you're there for a couple of days, right? I had 12-hour shift, so I started and I said, hey, let's apply some principles that I think will be helpful. First, stop talking on your phone because we lose a lot of volume when talking. We don't really realize that. So that was one of the key principles that I learned. So stop talking on your phone, and I want you just to focus on breathing in a more relaxed way. Less is more. I want you to focus on not deep breathing. I want you to do the very opposite. Breathe less and focus on relaxation as I'm giving you your therapy. Well, let me tell you, after within the 12-hour shift, that client, that the patient was being discharged out of the ICU because she improved so much. And normally that doesn't happen. And so that right there, I said, you know what, there's something here. And that's why I continue to pursue the training to become an advanced therapist. And since then, I've been kind of on Zoom, educating people all around the world, getting clients off their CPAP machine within 4 weeks, getting asthmatic patients off their medication and running like they thought they would never be able to do, because we were getting to the root core issue. And so it's when you're dealing with sleep, asthma, sleep apnea, what's the common denominator? It's the respiratory system. And when you're able to address the core underlying cause of these seems to be diverse or different symptoms, it comes down to the same core issue. And what I focus on is helping people increase the amount of oxygen into their cells at the cellular level, so that way the issue that they're having, whether it's sleep, snoring, as sleep apnea or asthma, goes away, because when you address the underlying cause, the symptoms go away. As long as you try to focus on addressing the symptom without addressing the cause, that's why they continue to sustain themselves. And so that's why how I gravitated towards this, transitioning from as a therapist, and now focusing on this being my primary source of educating people when it's dealing with respiratory issues and sleep issues and stress, because it's all related to one's respiratory system and not getting enough oxygen into their cells, and really moving away from what we commonly call misinformation related to healthy breathing. So I know that was a mouthful.
Oh, great. And so what is some of the what is some of the misinformation when it comes to breathing?
Well, that's a great question. And that is, we oftentimes, we're told to deep breathe. Like 95% of the health profession, that's the first thing that they tell you. Oh, take deep breaths. You got to get the oxygen in. Well, actually, that's the very opposite that needs to take place, because there are components in our lungs that when we overbreathe, it actually decreases the amount of oxygen, not necessarily in the blood, but at the cellular level. And that's where the core issue, much, in the medical profession, they're most focused on numbers. They're focused on getting the numbers up, like your oxygen saturation, but that's measuring the oxygen saturation in your blood, not at the cellular level. So this is what Dr. Buteyko discovered. These principles and techniques were helping people get more oxygen into their cells, because it's based on, physiologically, that's how we're wired, not to overbreathe, but to actually underbreathe. A simple example is when you think about a yogi master. Picture that yogi master in your mind. Visualize him. What do you notice about a yogi master's breathing?
Slow and relaxed.
Yeah, literally, you don't.
Yeah.
That's the very thing you don't notice.
Yeah.
And here is supposed to be the epitome of health. Notice his breathing. It's not deep and exaggerated and noisy. It's just the opposite. And that's the epitome of health. So that's where we want to get to. Now think about the opposite. If a person is coming into the ER having respiratory issues, what does their breathing look like?
Rapid. They're scared.
Rapid, noisy, deep breathing.
Yeah.
That's the very opposite of the epitome of health. So why are we telling people to move in that direction? It's because of misinformation and lack of information. And this is what Dr. Buteyko discovered, and why he brought these principles to the world, to our community. And when practiced, he had a really good grasp of physiology, right? This is not about, well, it's an opinion, it's based on how we're wired. And that's why he was able to get the results that he was able to, and why when we practice the same principles, aligning ourselves with the way we're physically wired to breathe in a very healthy, relaxed, less breathing is actually, you get more benefits. And this is the misinformation that has been filtered down because of the lack of understanding what's happening at the cellular level. That's the key, not about what's happening in the blood. That's not the end all be all. What's happening at the cellular level, that's what we need to identify. And that's what Dr. Buteyko brought to the table.
Wonderful. Now, if someone was interested in trying Buteyko breathing, are there any steps that they can take? Is it just basically relaxed breathing? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Well, that's just the one.
That's a lot of questions in one.
Yeah, and I love the questions, but they're surprisingly easy to answer.
Good.
Step one is that's relaxation is one step. The other key step is nasal breathing. Most people are not aware or even present to how their breathing is in general. Mouth breathing is very dangerous. And in my course, I go over the reasons and the why that is, but mouth breathing is very dangerous. We're not wired to breathe through our mouths. It causes a lot of problems, much more than we realize. Not only does it promote overbreathing, because think about how much volume of air can go through your mouth in comparison to your nose, right? It's like the difference between a fire hose and a garden hose. You see, so the way we're even designed gives us the awareness that we should be breathing less, not more. Plus, our nose is a filter. So think about it. So when you're breathing through your mouth, it's all unfiltered air. And where does that air directly go to? Your lungs, right? Unfiltered air going right into your lungs. Now, who does that make sense to when you start to think about it? And so these are just the physiological principles that Dr. Buteyko brought to the table that really started to significantly move the needle. So when you breathe through your nose, you're breathing a lot less. It's usually more relaxed. So these are just two key concepts that we start with, and then we work into exercises that strengthen your respiratory system, so that way you can have a more sustainable, healthy breathing with breathing through your nose. Many times people are not able to do that because their respiratory system is weak. Because all their life, they may even have focused on health, but they've focused on building and strengthening their muscles, not their respiratory system. So there's an imbalance. You can be very strong in muscles, but your breathing is very weak. And oftentimes the exercise that we engage in with not paying attention to our breathing makes our breathing worse, even as our body gets strengthened. So these are the areas that I address in helping people bring that back to balance. While you're exercising, using your exercise to maximize not only your muscles, but also your respiratory system, strengthen that as well, so that way you can maintain comfortably nasal breathing. And how that all equates is, not only do we want to breathe in a healthy way and strengthen our breathing during the day, but we also want to do that at night. And these are the principles that Dr. Buteyko brought to the table, that yes, you can have a significant impact by doing different techniques and principles, and impact your breathing at night and promote healthy breathing. Most people just are unaware of it. And so that's how we're able to also address nighttime sleeping issues that are pretty much related to our weak breathing, our ineffective breathing, our unhealthy breathing at night. Think about how much time does a person typically sleep at night? 7 to 10 hours, depending. That's a large chunk of time for us to either engage in healthy breathing or most of the time people are engaging in unhealthy breathing, snoring, gasping for air, and it all has an impact at the cellular level. So that's why I can talk all day about it, because to me, it just fascinated me that such a simple principle, but yet it's easily missed. Because think about it, most of our lives, people don't talk about, well, how do you breathe, or bring that to our awareness. And this is what the reason why is that you can't teach what you don't know. And this is why it's such a key part of our health system that is not, people are not aware of. And the very things that supposedly are, even as a respiratory therapist, I had to untrain myself, unravel some of my thinking, because even in that profession, you're taught to do the very opposite things that one should be doing, like taking a deep breath. It's amazing. And then you wonder why people are not getting better. Well, that's what Dr. Buteyko brought to the table. He discovers physiologically why people are not getting better. And such a simple concept can have a significant impact because we do it so much. Breathing is the one thing that you do the most of consistently. There's nothing else that you can think of that you do more of. You don't eat more, you don't sleep more. Breathing is the one thing that you do the most, and this is why when you make changes to your breathing, why it has such a significant impact.
Amazing information. And I really commend you on the work that you do. Now, what do you do with people? Like for myself, I've got, really bad allergies. So there are a lot of times where I cannot breathe through my nose because my sinuses are all. What recommendations can you give there then?
Beautiful. I always love that question because once again, it really brings to the table our misunderstanding, right? There are techniques that I can show you to unclog your nose within 5 minutes by adjusting your breathing. A lot of times the clogging of our nose is as a result of the unhealthy breathing that we're engaging in. So when you correct the breathing, it's actually a self-defense mechanism that your body, listen to this, your body is actually trying to decrease your breathing because you're not. This is why it's clogging. Ask yourself, why is my nose clogging up? A lot of times we think it's actually the body's self-defense mechanism. So when you course correct your breathing, you will notice that unlike you will notice that you're able to move in the direction of having a clearer nose so that way you can nasally breathe. The more you use it properly, the better it functions. When you use it improperly, then that's when it can lend itself to either other problems. And so that's one principle of how, and then when we talk about allergies, people don't realize it's not necessarily the breathing that's the problem. Allergies is very much related to, from Dr. Buteyko's perspective, is our gut, our immune system, right? When our immune system is not strong, right, it will recognize things and overreact to things. Like it's an overreactive immune system. So once again, that's all related to our breathing. Once you get that in check, and think about it, when you get more oxygen into your cells, that's going to impact every system of your entire body and make it more efficient, because that's the fuel source that it needs to run efficiently. So when we make those adjustments, that's why, we talk about the underlying cause of things. When we get down to the root problem, the basement level, it's going to be addressing things on the first level that we readily see. And so allergies is related to that. It's related to a unbalanced immune system. And when you correct your breathing, people actually, we have folks who have been allergic to dogs their entire life, but they're dog lovers. So it's always been an issue, right? But when you're able to, not in a week or 2 weeks, but over time, when you engage in effective breathing, you strengthen your immune system. We've had people who now all their life have been allergic to dogs. Now they can have Fido because they're not impacted by their allergies because they got to the root cause and not just focus on the symptom.
Absolutely. Okay, so Fred, for people that are listening, what's one thing you'd like them to take away from this interview?
Sure. If one simple thing is, as I said, become more aware of their breathing, paying more attention, being more aware that being present to nasal breathing, not mouth breathing. If you make that one change, that can have significant impact in many ways, right? And so, and it's just a matter of, well, how do we nasal breathe? Well, here's a unique concept. Shut your mouth, you'll save your life.
I love that.
Just keep your mouth closed, because when you keep your mouth closed, then typically there's only, you're going to mainly nose breathe. So you don't have to focus on, am I breathing through my nose? Just focus on just keeping your lips closed. And that can go a long way.
Wonderful. So you're just a wealth of information. So I understand you have a Facebook group where you share a lot of information. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, what I like to do is, once in a while, I'll share some tips on there with folks and provide information for those who want further instruction. They can, contact me, and get involved with my digital course that takes to another level, especially if a person has significant issues like sleep apnea, asthma. It really takes a little bit more hand holding and a little bit more visually seeing what's going on. On my Facebook group, once in a while we'll provide articles, share some information, tips and tricks on, your just promoting healthier breathing. Also, my website, I have some information there for folks to even hear from my students, video footage, so that way they can get a real sense of this is real, this is true, and it's a lot easier than people think. It just takes, so awareness, instruction, and guidance.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this wealth of information, Fred. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing this wisdom with all of us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And like I said, healthy breathing is one key source that, we don't realize how impactful our breathing is. But and I'll leave you with this. It's like Dr. Buteyko said this: breathing is like nuclear power. When done correctly, it can power up a city. When done incorrectly, that same nuclear power can destroy that city. And that's the case with our breathing.
Wow. Okay, wonderful. So if you're interested in talking to Fred or asking Fred some more questions, anywhere you're listening to this or where you're watching this, I'll have all his information, his contact information in the notes. Well, thank you so much, Fred. Thank you for being on the show. It was just wonderful having you, and great. Well, thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode. If you're looking for more ways to reduce the stress in your life, please visit www.therelaxationlounge.info. Here I've got access to a free Facebook page where you can get support, information on the podcast where I interview different individuals who share their techniques to help you reduce your stress, plus a membership that you can join where you can come and do stress-reducing practice on demand anytime you need to reduce the stress in your life and create more happiness in your world. I'll see you in the lounge.